Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham Yahushai, Bahasham Rachak Kodash. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into the book of Jeremiah, the 16th chapter. And as you can see in the subheading, distress is foretold. So as we continue to read through or go through and recount the judgments, right, that the Lord is, this is very similar, right, to when you read the first few chapters of the book of Ezekiel, right? It's sort of the same or similar manner in which the Lord is speaking to Ezekiel concerning what he's getting ready to do to Israel, right? And then also having the prophets take certain actions that would symbolize at a, on a larger scale, what would happen to Israel for their disobedience. So this is Jeremiah chapter 16, verse 1. The word of the Lord Yahweh came also unto me, saying, Thou shalt not take thee a wife, neither shalt thou have sons or daughters in this place. And when you look at the setting in which Jeremiah was in, the Lord was causing him to separate, right, from the people of the land, mentally, right, and spiritually, because even his relatives, right, and his kinsmen were against him, right? So the Lord is basically telling him, don't even bother, marrying or having kids here, because as we're going to go into in the subsequent verses, they're not going to survive. The inhabitants of this place are, their days are numbered and they don't even know it. Verse 3, For thus saith the Lord Yahweh concerning the sons and concerning the daughters that are born in this place, and concerning their mothers that bear them, and concerning their fathers that begat them in this land, they shall die of grievous deaths. So at the time when Jeremiah was on the scene, this is referring to the land, the territory of Judah, right? The inhabitants that were dwelling in there. And the Lord was saying this because he was about to bring that hard time upon them, where you would have some die by the famine, during the siege. You'd have some die by the sword of the Babylonian armies, and you'd have some die, being taken captive. And then you would have a few that would, or some that would survive and be actually taken away captive. Now, there are some verses in this chapter that we often use when even referring to Babylon, right, or referring to this place, to draw that connection, okay, but just qualifying, right, in context what the original sense of it was. But similarly, when you look at the condition of the state of the world today, we're also in a similar situation, right, where just as Jeremiah was surrounded by wicked Israelites and who were about to face impending judgment and doom, therefore it wasn't advisable for him to, as the Lord said, take a wife and start a family because it was a temporary, that peace that they had, that so-called peace, was temporary. And similarly, the Lord is about to bring destruction to this place, right? So when when brothers bring out precepts from here to sort of make that point, is due to the similarity, right, in the correlation between what was happening back then and what we see happening now. So continuing in verse 4, they shall die of grievous deaths, they shall not be lamented, neither shall they be buried. And you have to remember that usually when somebody dies or passes away, their loved ones, those that care, would lament. They would mourn. They would have the funeral. They would, they would go through all of that. But when the death is under certain circumstances, this is not always the case. And one example that I always refer to is, because it's a good visual example, when you watch the movie Bushwick. In the movie Bushwick, in the first scene, there's a girl, one of the main characters, that is walking with her boyfriend in the train station, right? And as they come up from the platform, right, they notice that it's pretty empty. Come to find out, they're walking right into a civil war, like gunshots and everything. So as her boyfriend goes up the stairs, he gets hit. I guess he either got shot or there was an explosion, but it hits him. He falls back down the stairs. He's on the verge of death. She panics and says, "Oh, she's gonna go find help." And as she runs out of the train station into the chaotic scene outside with gunshots firing, car alarms going off, people screaming, it doesn't take 2, 3, 4 minutes before she forgets about him, because there's so much going on that going to find help becomes trying to survive just crossing the street with all these gunshots, to almost being, um, um, sexually assaulted in some alley somewhere, and then being delivered by some janitor, right? Because that's the plot. That's what happens. And then now she's going along with the janitor because he looks like he knows what to do, and she's going on this whole thing to find her family, her grandma, and all of that. And from that point on, that's it. There's no going. She didn't go back for her man. She wasn't lamenting or mourning him. And in fact, I don't even think it was until a part of the scene, a part of the movie, where there was some tiny sense of relaxation, like where, okay, we're not constantly having, shots over our ears. We got like maybe an hour or two to just calm down, right? And at that moment is when you might even remember, oh shoot, such and such, passed, right? So that was just like one example from that movie, but the point in bringing that out is to show that with how bad, right, things were and how chaotic it was, you didn't even have time, right? She didn't even have time to mourn or lament him. So when the Lord says that they shall not be lamented, they won't even have the means to do so. Those that would lament you would likely be dead or sent away captive, or there would be so much going on. If one of your daughters dies, it's you see her blown to bits, you grab the other one and run. You don't have time to go and mourn and cry over her, because you got to focus on either you surviving or protecting the remaining survivors. As it says, neither shall they be buried, but they shall be as dung upon the face of the earth. Right? Nobody's going to be in this scene, at least. When you have these armies, and I mean, they had numbers, right? They were trained in war. They were on horseback. They had arrows. They had swords. They had torches. They were well provisioned, as to where you were weak because of starving in the siege, and they break through. It's chaos everywhere, right? They're killing people. They're burning buildings. They're destroying things, looting. You're not going to have time to go around trying to bury people. So you would see the slain, laid upon the ground like dung. As it says, upon the face of the earth, and they shall be consumed by the sword, meaning a lot of them will die by being killed, and by famine. And the way the famine would hit, once again, that's typically one of the main um, um, driving factors of death during a siege is famine. People starving to death, especially those that are locked within, those that are being besieged. And their carcasses shall be meat for the fowls of heaven and for the beasts of the earth, because it'll be laying there, right, in the open. Verse 5, for thus saith the Lord Yahweh, enter not into the house of mourning, neither go to lament or bemoan them. So the Lord was telling Jeremiah, don't, you're seeing this, and this is going to be their fate. Don't mourn for them, right? Don't go and bemoan them. Don't feel bad for them. For I have taken away my peace from this people, saith the Lord Yahweh. So the protection and the favor, right, that I had granted them in past times, I've taken that away. And that's why I'm going to do this. Even loving kindness and mercies. That's why this judgment was so brutal, because, the Lord was against Israel. Verse 6, both the great and the small shall die in this land. They shall not be buried, neither shall men lament for them. See, and this is why it was, when you read in the book of Lamentations, you'll get a good visual, right, of how, bad it was, because not only are you being slain, right, losing loved ones, but you're not even granted the honor of a proper burial. Those troops could care less about burying you. Why would they do that? So as it says here, neither shall men lament for them, nor cut themselves, nor make themselves bald for them, right? Which that was one of the practices around that time, which the Lord told us we shouldn't do, but it was a sign of like mourning, right? The cutting and the baldness and so on. So the scriptures tell you not to make baldness for the dead, right? It talks about like, not making the cuttings or baldness between your eyes. So this was clearly like a practice, a paganistic practice at least, or a practice of the neighboring nations that they would do, which eventually Israel picked up. Neither shall men tear themselves for them in mourning. Now, in the original King James Version, it's translated as this, but what it really means is to tear, as in to break, and not themselves, but basically to share, right, or to break bread, or to, share in a meal with those that are mourning to make them feel better. Unfortunately, my internet is not. They're working on something over here, so my internet is down for a while. So I was able to load the webpage though, before it went down, but I won't be able to pull up the interlinear on here. So you can do it yourself, but I'm going to pull it up on my phone and then read the definition, or read the not the interlinear, the other translation of Jeremiah 16 verse 7. So in Jeremiah 16:7, when you go into the NKJV version, it says, "Nor shall men break bread in mourning for them, to comfort them for the dead. Nor shall men give the cup of consolation to drink for their father or their mother." Because usually when, or you hear about somebody passing away, you go to the funeral, people would like comfort them or bring, maybe a little something, maybe a drink or something like that, or make some food, as trying to console them as best as you can. The Lord is saying here, this ain't going to be like that. This kind of judgment that's coming, this isn't going to be like your typical death and burial and no. This is judgment. Verse 8, "Thou shalt not also go into the house of feasting to sit with them to eat and to drink." So the Lord is telling Jeremiah, like these people have death marked upon their foreheads, so don't associate yourself with them. When they go to feast, to drink and do all these things, don't be around them. Don't join in with them. Verse 9, "For thus saith the Lord Yahweh of hosts, the God of Israel, Behold, I will cause to cease out of this place in your eyes," so you would witness this, "and in your days while you're alive, the voice of mirth," which is joy, laughter, "the voice of gladness, the voice of the bridegroom, and the voice of the bride." Now, in a well-functioning society, right, that happens. People get married. You can, you hear the joy, you hear the, the gathering and the ceremony and all of that. That's the voice of the bridegroom and the bride and the gladness. When all hell is breaking loose, you're not hearing that. You're hearing screams. You're hearing, death, right? You're hearing fires. So that's what the Lord means by He's going to cause it to cease, because He's going to bring danger and judgment, and people ain't going to be doing this in that time. All right. Verse 10, "And it shall come to pass, when thou shalt shew this people all these words." So when you tell them this and you prophesy this to them, "and they shall say unto thee, Wherefore hath the Lord pronounced all this evil against us?" And this is like, it's like infuriatingly funny in a way, right? Because, you go and prophesy this judgment that the Lord has pronounced against them, and then they're going to ask you, wait, how come? Like, what do you mean? Why would the Lord speak such great evil against us? And it gets even worse, right? Or what is our iniquity? So in a land filled with idolatry, filled with adultery, filled with underhanded practices, oppression, wickedness, ungodly ways, You're gonna ask, what is our iniquity? Well, don't be surprised, because they'll do the same today. You have adulterous, wicked people, and you tell them the Lord's about to destroy this place with them included, and then they'll look at you and ask you, wait, what do you mean? Why? That's hate. How could the Lord do that? No, no, not the Jesus I worship. Clearly, you're worshiping the wrong one. Or what is our sin that we have committed against the Lord Yahweh our God? I wonder. Verse 11, then shalt thou say unto them. So when they ask this is what you're going to reply. Because your fathers have forsaken me, saith the Lord Yahweh, and have walked after other gods, and have served them, and have worshipped them, and have forsaken me, and have not kept my law, and ye have done worse than your fathers. So remember that at this time that we're reading of, you've had like the books we went through, right, of like First and Second Kings and so on, and I'm sure you've read in there the account, and that's just one account, but the account of Israelites, right, the kings and the people constantly going astray, the things Manasseh did, the things Ahaz did, the things Ahab and Jezebel did, and so on and so forth. So they forsook the Lord. They did whatever they wanted to do. They worshiped idols, like what Jeroboam did. And the Lord is saying, your fathers did this. Your forefathers, those that came before you, this is how they lived. And you, verse 12, and ye have done worse than your fathers. For behold, ye walk every one after the imagination of his heart, that they may not hearken unto me. So you want to know why this judgment is coming onto you? Because you followed in your father's footsteps, your foreparents' footsteps of wickedness, and did worse. And you follow after the imagination of your evil heart, meaning the thoughts that come to your mind, which are not righteous, and nor are they bound by righteousness. Those intentions are what you seek and desire after, right? You live after the flesh. And in doing so, you're not hearkening or listening to the Lord. Therefore, I cast you out of this land into a land that ye know not, similar to what the Lord did to the northern kingdom, which he, by way of his prophets, warned them he would do that, and they didn't listen. And so the Lord did it. And then now, once again, warning the southern kingdom by his prophets, he said, I'm going to take you out of this land, and you're going to be captives. You're going to be sent into a land that you don't know, over there in the region of Shinar. Neither ye nor your fathers, and there shall ye serve other gods day and night, where I will not shew you favor. Because you wanna idol worship so bad. Well, I'm gonna take you to a land where they serve idols, and you can worship them. And I'm not I'm not gonna show you any mercy. I'm not gonna show you any favor, because when I was willing to do so, you basically disrespected me. Verse 14, therefore, behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that it shall no more be said. So the days come, meaning at some point, right? Even though, you're going to go into captivity and so on, there's going to come a time, right? In other words, there's going to come a time, says the Lord, that it shall no more be said, the Lord Yahweh liveth, that brought up the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt, because that was one of the main things the Lord was known for. If one heathen said to another, hey, have you heard of the God of Israel? The other would reply, oh, you mean like the one that delivered them from Egypt? He messed up Egypt with them plagues and stuff, the Red Sea and everything. You talking about that God? So he was known for that. But here, as the Lord is saying, no more is it going to be said, right? The Lord lives that brought the children of Israel up out of the land of Egypt. But the Lord Yahweh liveth, that brought up the children of Israel from the land of the north, and from all the lands whither he had driven them. Now, this is in verse 14 and 15. Behold, the days come. That future time, or that fulfillment of that, is going to be in our time. It's when the Lord delivers us out of the land of the north here, which is America, okay, or Babylon. And the reason it's this and not necessarily ancient Babylon is because of the 15th verse. Yes, the Lord did have mercy on us, and Israel returned, right, the exiles from Babylon back to the land. However, The latter part, all right, about from all the lands whither he had driven them, that didn't take place at that time, all right? It's in this time that the Lord, via prophecy, is going to gather the children of Israel, the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, from all the lands where they have been driven, right, from the four corners of the earth. And I will bring them again into their land that I gave unto their fathers. See, because during the return of the exiles, right, in after the Babylonian Empire was taken over by the Achaemenid Empire, or the Persians, the northern kingdom, right, as a whole, weren't brought back to the land by the Lord. Okay. Verse 16, behold, I will send for many fishers, saith the Lord Yahweh, and they shall fish them. And after will I send for many hunters, and they shall hunt them from every mountain and from every hill and out of the holes of the rocks. Now, at the time, once again in context, at the time of Jeremiah receiving this message, the Lord was referring to actually sending these or likening these troops, right, the Babylonians, to fishers where Israel would be the fish, and likening them to hunters, right, where Israel would be the prey. And he would send them into the land, right, of Judah, to basically search out and seek out and find Jake wherever they may be, in the land, wherever they may have tried to flee to or hide, and then destroy them or take them captive. Okay, because when you read, continuing in the 17th verse, the Lord tells you why, right? As he says, he's going to do this, for mine eyes are upon all their ways. They are not hid from my face, neither is their iniquity hid from mine eyes, right? Because of all that wickedness that they were doing, that he was warning them about. Verse 18, and first I will recompense their iniquity and their sin double, because they have defiled my land. They have filled mine inheritance, i.e. the land, with the carcasses of their detestable and abominable things, i.e. their idols. Okay, so the Lord is saying, as a result of you committing these iniquities before my eyes, polluting my temple and polluting my land, right? Setting up shrines and idols and so on and so forth, and sacrifices onto them. I'm going to send these armies and these troops, and they're going to fish you like fishermen, right? And hunt you like hunters from everywhere you may be and everywhere you may be hiding. Now, with that being said, there is another layer to verse 16, right? As there are to, some of these other precepts here, like I mentioned in even the beginning verses. And so there are times when you'll see we'll refer to Jeremiah 16 and 16 in the prophetic sense or in the spiritual sense, referring to now. And the reason is because, technically speaking, right, the Lord will perform a variation of Jeremiah 16 and 16 again, right? And this time in a slightly different sense, in that the fishers that he's going to send in this time are not, say like the armies of a foreign nation per se, but rather the prophets or the teachers or the men of the Lord, which would fish, right? Them here being the elect, right? Which would be likened on to, the good fish that we would fish by teaching this word. And when you go into, the New Testament, right, the Lord mentioned making us or making the men of the Lord fishers of men, right? So in this time, in the spiritual sense, right, the Lord sends us out as the fishers to fish for the elect by teaching this word. And after that, once the elect are, have been caught in that net of truth, and then the Lord commences judgment, then he will send for hunters, right? Then he would turn the peace and the teaching into more of a, hunting, as it says, and they shall hunt them from every mountain and from every hill and from out of the holes of the rock. So everywhere that the enemies of the Lord would be hiding, he would send his hunters, okay, which would, would involve the men of the Lord, right? When he blesses them with spiritual power as a whole. You can imagine scenes like, when the Lord, like the Apostle John mentioned, right, the New Jerusalem coming down from God out of heaven. What do you think they're going to do at that point? In fact, I think it's in the book of Isaiah. It mentions basically gathering these ones on high and putting them in pits. So we'll find out, the hunters of the Lord will seek them out wherever they may be, in underground bunkers and semi-space stations, wherever they may be, um, and find them, right? So that's the other layer of Jeremiah 16:16 verse. And it's important to, like I mentioned, have both contexts of it, so you can be skillful in using it, right? Using these precepts, or using the word of the Lord, in understanding, okay, what does it mean in the sense of the whole chapter, but also what is the spiritual or prophetic meaning to it. So continuing on, from verse 19, Jeremiah 16:19, O Yahweh, my strength and my fortress and my refuge in the day of affliction, the Gentiles shall come unto thee from the ends of the earth, and shall say, surely our fathers have inherited lies, vanity, and things wherein there is no profit. And these quote unquote Gentiles here are actually referring to Israelites, okay, that were in a Gentile state of mind, okay, and at the end they would be gathered, right? They would come to the realization, and when he said, all right, our fathers have inherited lies and vanity, remember the Lord mentioned how the when speaking to Israel, he mentioned how your fathers basically forsook me, right? So the ways that they went in and taught their children were ways of lies and vanity, things that profited not. And that's what led to Israel ending up in a Gentile state of mind, right? Or a destitute place. But having the truth being spread out, they would come to that realization, and those that are of the elect would basically turn back to the Lord. And unfortunately, I can't even cross-reference this right now. But let's keep on going. Verse 20, shall a man make gods unto himself, and they are no gods? And I'll read this in another version as well, from my phone. But Jeremiah 16:20. In another translation, let's see. In the CSB, right, it says, can one make gods for himself, but they are not gods? NLT, can people make their own gods? These are not real gods at all. All right, so shall a man make gods unto himself? Meaning, like, it's rhetorically asking, but like, is it possible, right, for man to make their own gods? Obviously not, because how a god is greater than a man, and you cannot create a god that is greater than yourself. It can't come from you, right? And as it says, and they are no gods, because in the minds of the people, when they make these idols, they may look at them as gods, but they're nothing. They're not. They're vanity. Verse 21, therefore, behold, I will this once cause them to know, and I will cause them to know mine hand and my might, and they shall know that my name is Yahweh. And the scriptures tell you that the Lord is known in the judgment which he executeth. So how did the Lord do this during the time of delivering us out of Egypt? By judging them. And it was known, right? The might and the power of the Lord was known even into the neighboring nations. Why do you think the nations in the Levant feared us so much, right? When we started to conquer and take over the different cities and so on. And the Lord said he's going to do that again. Okay, so that both Israel and, everybody else would know and acknowledge, just because the Lord is long suffering, right, does not make him a pushover. And sometimes he has to, flex that power through judgment so you can fully understand who it is that you're dealing with. So with that brings us to the end of Jeremiah, the 16th chapter. Lord willing, this is edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahushai, Bahasham, Recha, Kodash. And until next time, Shalom.